Deltarune tomorrow, at least it is if you're watching this on June 23rd, 2026, and we're already looking at Chapter 5. I figured that I'd gather up all the theories and analysis of the first 4 chapters that's been covered on this channel and make some predictions. High-key, I don't think I'm going to be all that good at this. Though one of my favorite parts about Deltarune so far is how it's been pretty unpredictable despite all the foreshadowing. So, hey, it's not a big deal. So real quick, let's cover a few things that we learned in the new trailer, so we can confirm or reject a few smaller theories, and then we'll get into it. Be sure to subscribe for more Deltarune content, plus some other stuff. I'm really excited to talk about Chapter 5 whenever it comes out, and if you're watching this video after it's already released, then feel free to roast any awful predictions in this video. It's only gonna hurt my feelings a little bit. So as we pretty much already knew, this chapter is flower themed. The fields of pink and gold described by Gerson's book, and in the trailer we see flower pot and flower themed enemies, as well as these trash guys, and Goku Nubert. While the flowers and stuff seem to mostly point towards it being a Flower King Dark World, these trash guys seem to point to this alley that's somewhat nearby. Nubert could be from Alphys, either from her Teen Zone review or just from her house. However, I also know in Undertale that there are a few lines from Alphys explaining anime to Asgore, and he did have that katana, so perhaps she's lent some to him in Deltarune and he's kind of a weeb now. Would also explain the Japan-themed elephant in the trailer. Yeah, so it turns out that the Matsuri Festival promo art from a little while ago might not just be for fun. Perhaps the festival in Hometown is a little Japanesey. But at the very least we know that the Dark World really seems to be like that. So I will say the big theory that is looking a tiny bit less likely is the one that the Chapter 5 Dark World covers the entirety of Hometown and the festival, rather than just the Flower King. After all, everything we see in the trailer seems to be something that could fit in the Flower King. But there's also nothing to disprove it yet. I just kinda would have expected it to be a little more obvious if this was the setting for the Dark World. However, and I'm gonna make my very first prediction here, one that could be very easily proven wrong almost instantly as the chapter starts, but I still think that this theory holds a lot of weight. I think there's a very good chance that at least at some point we're gonna have a Dark World that covers the whole festival. There's just been a lot of foreshadowing and stuff, and I think it'd be cool. So that's my first prediction. Also, something worth mentioning is that Rowsey is flying again in the trailer. He actually does this a few times throughout the game, though it's never directly mentioned. But yeah, he kinda just floats sometimes. It's an interesting detail. It might just be for visual flair since she is the main magic user of the group, or perhaps it's a connection to Asriel, who also floats in Undertale. So let's start off with some predictions. First off, some high confidence ones, like 70% certainty plus. Maybe these aren't the most interesting ones, but it's still stuff that's unconfirmed. So let's go. First off, I think Asgore will be the primary antagonistic figure of Chapter 5, serving as the final boss, based on this panel named Boss 3. But it is still kind of interesting, because this will be the first time we've seen a pure light nerd be the boss. Sure, the knight who's probably a light nerd was the boss for Chapter 4, but that's a bit different. Secondly, I think Noelle will end up in the Dark World again. It just makes too much sense. Everybody is going to the festival, there's the hinted return of the Weird Route, and the Inferno of Jealousy that is described in Gerson's 5th book, which is likely primarily talking about Asgore, but it could also hint towards jealousy from Berdly towards Noelle, or maybe even from Noelle towards Chris in the Weird Route, where Chris is the one bringing Noelle to the festival. I also think there's a very good chance that Sans will show up a decent amount in the festival part at least, as after all, if there's somebody that Asgore is jealous of, it would be him. I kinda doubt that he'll actually go into the Dark World, so I'm not gonna make any predictions there, but I guess that would be neat, we haven't seen much of him. And for my third prediction, I think this chapter will keep the same format as the others, even more closely than Chapter 3 did, bringing back a separate hidden boss, rather than the pseudo-hidden bosses like the Knight or Eram. But yeah, so far Toby's pretty much directly said that this will be the final, chill, Chapter 1 or 2 style adventure. But I definitely also think that this is partially a meta thing about Rowsey's character, as he's going to be trying to keep it together like that the whole time. So I also fully expect it to fall apart at the end, which is pretty exciting. Speaking of Rowsey, I think one of the main focuses for this chapter will be him trying to go back to normalcy after Chapter 4, and especially after Susie gaining the knowledge of the end of the prophecy. I think this chapter will be a bit of a breaking point for him, culminating with his secret boss at the end of this. I think he'll have a really big character moment with the secret boss especially. And how his character handles everything is likely going to very heavily impact how these final 2 chapters play out, if he's able to adapt and grow, or if it breaks him. I personally lean towards the belief that things are probably going to go really wrong, and this would be an all hope is lost moment in the story, ending the second act and setting up the last 2 chapters as the big third act of the story. Oh yeah, and perhaps this is more of another 99% confidence theory, but I think that Asriel is alive. Even if he doesn't come home in Chapter 5, I don't think he's dead, nor I think that Rowsey is his dust. And you can slot in most crack theories here. No Papyrus Knight, Gaster Nuke, or anything of the sort. I also don't think we'll see Gaster at all in Chapter 5. Save him for Chapter 6 or 7. And that's just assuming that he ever actually comes to the forefront of Deltarune. If I made like a full prediction for everything, all 7 chapters, I do think he'll definitely come up eventually. Although I do think a lot of the character traits for Gaster are kind of just imagined by the community, so I am really interested to see just how different he ends up being, and his role in the game ends up being, than how we've imagined him so far. Though we do also have a decent amount of stuff in Deltarune specifically, where we can guess about his motives and everything he's doing. So, you know, it'll be interesting. And now, time for just a couple iffy ones. Predictions, they're around 40% chance, tops. I think this chapter will be the climax of the Weird Route, but not the end. Yes, this is in contention with the image that most Weird Route predictions are based on, which, if you haven't seen it yet, it's basically this, and it's this image of a bunch of numbers, and it's theorized that their size and visibility are based on the importance of the Weird Route within the chapter. But you can't even see chapters 6 and 7, so people theorize that the Weird Route won't even come up then, and it'll end in chapter 5. But something that people also don't mention is that if you go for the pages for chapters 1 and 3, the text not applicable appears, versus chapter 2 where applicable appears in chapter 5, where the 5 numbers are. However, for chapters 6 and 7, you just see the sleeping dog, and it's named Room Dog Check. And increasing the number of chapters is always a sleeping dog. And yes, I checked chapter 666, and it was also a sleeping dog. It seems to be pointing towards chapter 6 and 7 not even existing, at least in the context of the Weird Route, so I'm not really sure what to think. So I'm just gonna guess that while the Weird Route will end at chapter 5, it won't be an ending per se. And instead the game will continue on, but the final ending will be recontextualized by the Weird Route, maybe with some slight changes. So the game ends up with pretty much just having one ending, but it means very different things depending on which route you took. For my second prediction, I think a semi-important character who we haven't seen yet will make an appearance in the Chapter 5 Light World. Personally, I'm leaning towards either Papyrus or Azrael making a visit. Similar to how we finally got to meet Carol in Chapter 4, it doesn't seem like Deltarune wants to hold everything for Chapter 7, thankfully. So I bet we'll see at least one of them. Third, I think the Inferno of Jealousy is literally going to be the sun shown in the trailer. We see the sun in the new Dark World, and I've seen this theory mentioned a couple times online after the trailer dropped. And yeah, I think it makes sense, plus it's pretty weird to see the sun in a Dark World. I mean, it's literally got dark in the name, so I think this explains its presence. Finally, I think Carol will also show up in the Dark World, with there being a good chance that Asgore got his katana from her. So she'll probably not only know of this Dark World that he made with the katana, but I bet she'll show up to either shut down his little flower kingdom, or she'll be the one who instructed him to make it in the first place, and she'll be showing up to do something there. And now, perhaps the most interesting predictions. These are a big risk, but at the same time, they aren't based on nothing. These are absolute maximum 20% chance of happening, probably much lower. So starting off with a bang. I'm predicting that the Knight's identity will be revealed by the end of Chapter 5. Despite the chapter apparently being the last more laid back one, I think we're going to get some moments right at the end that set up those last 2 mysterious chapters. And with the huge focus that the Knight got in Chapter 4, I think that it makes sense to move on to a new phase of the story with this chapter, and revealing who the Knight actually is for certain could start to shift the focus onto the conspiracy around them and Carol and their endgame. And yeah, I'm really assuming that Carol's not the Knight, but I don't know, maybe she is. There really isn't much to hint towards Chapter 5 being the exact time that we will learn their identity, and well, there's not even much to hint that this Knight will show up in Chapter 5. So that's why I put it in unlikely, but I'm mostly just guessing this because I think it'd be a good spot in the flow of the story for the reveal in my opinion. Seems natural. My next prediction is that the prophecy will end with the end of Chapter 5, and will reach the world's end. This is partially based on something that Gerson says. And just summarizing the quote, he says, "There was only one more chapter, and after that it all stopped. That next book, it never did get written. The story became so grand and overwhelming that it swallowed up the author himself. The ones who could write the next, the youth, the pen was lying there for them to pick it up, to make the next page. They never did." So while this partially seems to be a reference to his actual book and the fact that his son never continued on and finished his story, it also supports the idea that the true ending hasn't been written yet in the prophecy. And this kind of makes sense from a meta perspective as well, as we've been given so few details on those final 2 chapters, other than the fact that Chapter 6 has apparently been easier to develop. It leads me to think that there is a very good chance there'll be a big rug pull. And while Chapter 6 may partially be covered by the prophecy, Chapter 7 is where all bets are off, and the heroes are really going to be writing their own story from then on out. Okay, and this is a pretty recent one that is really vague and is mostly based on the trailer that we just got, but I think Flowey might have some sort of importance in Chapter 5. I mean, I wasn't really for this theory, but look at those faces in the trailer. Plus, Toby's jump scare looks just like Flowey, and honestly, I'm beginning to question more and more if Friend and Flowey have more in common than I thought. I mean, Flowey calls himself your best friend, they both have that smile, and even if they aren't literally one and the same, the parallels are there. So I wonder if we'll see a bit of that explored there in the Chapter 5 Weird Route. Okay, and one last one. Friend. I think it will be inside Chapter 5. I'm not totally convinced that it'll be the secret boss that Rousey fights. It certainly could be. But I think that Friend will mostly be tied to the weird route, and that's where you'll see him. Finally, these are ridiculously huge claims, but I'm gonna make a couple of them. They will likely sound really dumb in 2 weeks, but if they're right, I'll get a gloat about how I somehow got it right. But starting out, I'm just gonna straight up throw my weight behind Root's theory. If you haven't heard of that, then you should go watch the video because it's really good. And honestly, this isn't even really me saying that the majority of ideas in the theory are stupid or unlikely, but more so that there's a lot of parts to that theory and it would be kinda crazy if they were all right. But with this ridiculously huge claim that's probably wrong, I'm gonna say that it'll be around 95% right. The festival is the Dark World. The weird route consists of going around killing everyone in the Dark World, and then going into the bunker and fighting Friend. It's a lot of things that have quite a bit of evidence, but it's more so about the way that it all stitches it together. Still, I'm predicting Root's theory. Let's see if it's right. Finally, there's a good chance that we won't get an answer to this question in Chapter 5. But basically, I think that Chris did something in the past that they were repressing. It's a great answer to a lot of the questions that we have about them. Why are people scared of them at school? Why is Noelle so wary of them? What do they have that night? And what's going on with the tree and the eggs in the Chapter 4 art therapy room? I think this will end up being one of the most important parts of the game and really shine a new light on Chris as a character. I suppose this is pretty vague for a crazy claim, so I guess it's more so that I just think it's a little early to be guessing this, because I think it's going to be such a late reveal. And also, I don't think it's going to be some reveal that Chris was secretly evil, but more so that there's just more to them that we don't know about yet as the player. I talked about this a bit in a previous video. And finally, these aren't predictions, but they're more of an informal wish list. Stuff I personally want in the game, and mostly just stuff I think would be fun to have. First off, more Birdly. He's fun and I miss him. And I'd also really like if there's a festival going on in Castletown too. Maybe Lancer gets everyone to put it on so Rousey can go to the festival with Chris and Susie. Plus, most importantly, it would give us more Queen content. Speaking of Castletown, while it doesn't have to be in Chapter 5, it does seem like some of the mechanics here were kind of forgotten about in Chapters 3 and 4. Stuff like the item fusion from Chapter 2. And I think it would make the game feel a little bit more complete to bring all this stuff up to date eventually. I also really want Noelle back in the Dark World, and I would love for more characters, including her, to become aware of their existence. As the reveals of secrets like that to other characters are always some of my favorite moments in any series or story. Plus, I think that new interesting things can be done with Noelle's character after a reveal like that. Finally, if Chapter 5 introduces a new Darkner antagonist similar to King, Queen, or Tenna, I really hope that there's something a bit more fresh than Tenna. Don't get me wrong, I like the guy, but he felt very standard as a Toby Fox character, pretty similar to Papyrus and especially Metaton, so something completely new would be neat to see explored. Especially given that this will likely be the last chance for a lighthearted antagonist like this in Deltarune. Though again, it'll probably just end up being Asgore, but maybe he gets a cool sidekick or something. So that's all. Chapter 5 is coming soon, and this is just a fun video I wanted to get out before it was released so I can look back at it and evaluate just how wrong I was. See you after Chapter 5. I'll probably make a character analysis video over the chapter, or at the very least, over my favorite aspects of the chapter. So see you then. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe, and check out my videos over Deltarune Theories. Bye.